What would you do if you discovered someone sleeping outside on the coldest night of the year, holding the most important person in your entire world? Before we jump into this amazing true story, please hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Viral Tales. We love hearing from you, so comment below and tell us where you're watching from right now. Richard Hayes was the wealthiest man in the entire state. His house was so big that you could fit 20 normal houses inside it. Every room had paintings worth more money than most people earn in their whole lives. The floors were made of white marble that shined like mirrors. Giant windows stretched from the floor to the ceiling, and outside those windows were gardens with fountains and statues and flowers from countries on the other side of the world. Richard owned shopping centers, tall buildings downtown, and factories in 7 different states. When he walked into a room, everyone stopped talking and looked at him. They called him Mr. Hayes, and they said his name with respect and maybe a little bit of fear. But here's the strange thing about Richard Hayes. Even though he had everything anyone could ever want, he always looked sad. His face was handsome but tired. His eyes were gray like storm clouds, and they never seemed to smile even when his mouth did. He worked every single day, even on holidays. His phone rang constantly with important calls from important people. He traveled on private airplanes to meetings in cities far away. He signed papers and made decisions that affected thousands of people. But at the end of every day, when he came home to his enormous house, he walked through the front door into silence, and that silence felt heavier than anything else in his life. Richard had one treasure that mattered more than all his money. Her name was Emma, and she was his baby daughter. Emma was only 7 months old. She had the brightest green eyes you ever saw, like perfect emeralds. Her hair was soft and golden like sunshine. When she smiled, 2 tiny dimples appeared in her chubby cheeks. Emma was perfect in every single way. Richard loved her more than he had ever loved anything. But loving someone and knowing how to show that love are 2 very different things. Richard didn't know how to be a father. His own father had been cold and distant, always working, never home. So Richard did what he knew. He worked. He made money. He bought Emma the most expensive crib, the softest blankets, the finest clothes. But he rarely held her. He rarely played with her. He was always too busy, too tired, too focused on the next big business deal. He paid other people to take care of Emma. He told himself that providing for her was the same as loving her. Deep down, though, he knew something was missing. He just didn't know how to fix it. One of the people Richard paid to care for Emma was a woman named Rosa Martinez. Rosa was 50 years old with warm brown skin and eyes that looked like they held 1,000 stories. Her hair was black with streaks of gray, and she always wore it in a long braid down her back. Rosa had come to America from Mexico 20 years ago with nothing but a suitcase and a dream of a better life. She worked as a maid in Richard's massive house. Every day, she cleaned the endless rooms, washed the expensive dishes, and polished the marble floors until they gleamed. She wore a simple gray uniform and white shoes that had been repaired so many times they were held together mostly by thread and hope. Rosa was invisible to most people who visited the house. They looked right through her, as if she were made of glass. But Rosa didn't mind. She was used to being invisible. What mattered to her was her work, and more than anything, what mattered was baby Emma. Rosa loved Emma with a love so big and so pure it couldn't be measured. From the moment she first held that tiny baby in her arms, something in Rosa's heart cracked open and poured out. She had left her own children back in Mexico with her mother while she worked to send money home. She missed them every single day. The pain of being apart from them never went away. But caring for Emma helped fill the empty space just a little bit. Rosa sang to Emma in Spanish, old songs her grandmother had taught her about stars and flowers and the ocean. She rocked Emma gently when the baby cried. She noticed everything about Emma. She knew when Emma was hungry before Emma even made a sound. She knew when Emma was sleepy, scared, or just needed to be held close and told that everything would be all right. Rosa talked to Emma all day long as she worked. She told Emma stories about her homeland, about mountains covered in mist and markets full of colors and music. She told Emma that she was special, that she was loved, that she would grow up to be strong and kind. And Emma, even though she was just a baby, seemed to understand. When Rosa held her, Emma stopped crying. When Rosa sang, Emma's eyes grew wide and peaceful. When Rosa whispered goodnight, Emma drifted off to sleep with a tiny smile on her face. Then came the night that changed everything. It was late November, and the weather had been getting colder each day. But nobody expected what happened that particular night. The temperature dropped suddenly, like someone had opened a giant freezer door in the sky. The wind howled and screamed around the big house. Inside, everyone turned up their heaters and put on extra blankets. But in the nursery where Emma slept, something terrible happened. The expensive heater that kept the room warm made a strange clicking sound, then a low humming sound, and then nothing at all. It just stopped working. The room that had been cozy and warm began to turn cold. The cold crept in through the windows like invisible fingers. It settled over Emma's crib like a heavy blanket made of ice. Emma woke up shivering. Her little body, which had been warm and comfortable, suddenly felt frozen. She began to cry. At first, it was a soft cry, but it quickly became louder and more desperate. Emma kicked her legs and waved her tiny fists in the air. Tears rolled down her red cheeks. She cried and cried, but the nursery was far away from where the other people in the house were sleeping. Nobody heard her. Nobody came. Nobody except Rosa. Rosa was down the hall folding laundry when she heard Emma's cries echoing through the quiet house. She dropped the towel she was holding and ran as fast as she could. Her heart pounded with fear. She knew Emma's cries. She knew all of them. This wasn't a hungry cry or a tired cry. This was a scared cry. Something was very wrong. Rosa burst through the nursery door and gasped. The room felt like a refrigerator. She could see her own breath making little clouds in the air. She rushed to Emma's crib and picked up the baby, wrapping her in 2 blankets, then 3, then 4. But Emma kept crying and shivering. The blankets weren't enough. The room was too cold. Rosa's mind raced. She needed to fix the heater. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and called Tom, the man who fixed things in the house. She called once. No answer. She called twice. 3 times. 4 times. 5 times. Nothing. Tom had left early that evening to visit his sick mother. His phone was turned off. There was nobody to fix the heater. There was nobody to help. Rosa looked at Emma's face. The baby's lips were starting to turn a strange color. Her crying was getting weaker. Rosa felt panic grab her throat. She had to do something. She couldn't just wait and hope someone would come. Every second mattered. And that's when Rosa made a decision that seemed crazy but felt completely right. She wrapped Emma in her own thick shawl, the only warm thing Rosa owned besides her uniform. It was a shawl her grandmother had given her many years ago, woven with red and gold thread. Rosa held Emma close to her chest, feeling the baby's cold little body against her own warmth. Then she did something that nobody would understand, unless they had loved someone the way Rosa loved Emma. She carried Emma outside into the garden. The night air was freezing, but it wasn't as cold as the broken nursery with its icy walls and dead heater. Rosa knew that her own body heat, combined with the shawl, would keep Emma warmer than all the blankets in that frozen room. She walked quickly through the dark garden to a wooden bench near a stone fountain. The fountain wasn't running because of the cold. Everything was still and silent except for the sound of Emma's crying getting softer. Rosa sat down on the bench and wrapped herself and Emma together in the shawl like they were one person. She began to hum a melody her mother used to sing when Rosa was a little girl scared of the dark. The song had no words, just a gentle tune that rose and fell like waves on a beach. Rosa rocked back and forth slowly, keeping rhythm with the song. She held Emma tight against her heart, so the baby could hear it beating, steady and strong and safe. Minutes passed, then an hour. Emma's crying faded to small whimpers, then to quiet breathing. The baby's tiny fingers grabbed onto Rosa's uniform and held on tight. Emma pressed her ear against Rosa's chest and listened to that heartbeat. That proof that someone was there, that someone cared, that someone would protect her no matter what. Rosa sat on that hard wooden bench and watched the night sky above her. The moon was bright and full, casting silver light across the garden. Stars twinkled like tiny diamonds scattered across black velvet. Rosa's arms began to ache from holding Emma in the same position for so long. Her back started to hurt. The cold wind bit her face and made her nose turn red. Her fingers felt numb even though they were tucked inside the shawl with Emma. But Rosa didn't move. She didn't adjust her position. She didn't put Emma down even for a second. As long as Emma was warm and safe, nothing else in the whole world mattered. Rosa thought about many things as she sat there in the freezing night. She thought about her own children back in Mexico, Miguel and Sofia. Miguel was 12 now, and Sofia was 9. Rosa had left them 4 years ago to come work in America. She sent almost all her money home to her mother, who was raising them. Rosa talked to her children on the phone every Sunday, but it wasn't the same as holding them, kissing their foreheads, tucking them into bed at night. Sometimes the pain of missing them felt like a rock sitting on her chest, heavy and sharp. She wondered if they remembered what her voice sounded like in person, not just through a phone. She wondered if they understood why she had left, why she had to be so far away. But holding Emma helped ease that pain just a little bit. When Rosa sang to Emma, she pretended she was singing to Miguel and Sofia. When she rocked Emma to sleep, she remembered rocking her own babies. When she whispered that everything would be okay, she was saying it to all 3 children, the one in her arms and the 2 an ocean away. Rosa knew that Emma wasn't really her daughter. Emma belonged to Mr. Hayes. But love doesn't follow rules about who belongs to who. Love just flows wherever it wants to go, like water finding cracks in stone. 2 hours passed on that bench. Then 3. The night got colder and darker. Rosa's whole body shivered, but she made sure Emma stayed wrapped tightly in the warmest part of the shawl. She kept humming and rocking, like a machine that would never stop. Her eyes grew heavy. She felt so tired. Rosa had woken up at 5 that morning to start cleaning the house. She had scrubbed floors, washed windows, changed bedsheets, and cooked meals. She had worked for 16 hours straight, with only one short break, to eat a small sandwich. Her body was exhausted. Her mind was foggy with tiredness. Around midnight, Emma finally fell into a deep, peaceful sleep. The baby's breathing became slow and steady, in and out, like gentle waves. A tiny smile appeared on Emma's face, the kind of smile babies make when they dream of happy things. Rosa looked down at that smile and felt her heart swell with so much love it almost hurt. She kissed the top of Emma's head softly. Emma's golden hair smelled like baby shampoo and milk, and something sweet that Rosa couldn't name. Rosa told herself she would just close her eyes for 1 minute, just 60 seconds to rest them. Then she would get up and carry Emma back inside. She would find blankets and build a warm nest in the living room near the fireplace. She would stay awake all night watching Emma to make sure she was safe. Just 1 minute of rest, and then she would move. But the moment Rosa closed her eyes, sleep grabbed her like a giant hand and pulled her down into darkness. She was so tired, so completely exhausted, that her body simply gave up, her head tilted back against the bench. Her arms, still wrapped around Emma, relaxed but didn't let go. Even in sleep, Rosa's body knew its job was to protect the baby. Her muscles stayed tight enough to hold Emma secure. And there they sat together on that cold wooden bench as the night grew even darker around them. 2 people, one big and one small, wrapped in an old shawl, breathing together in the freezing air. Miles away in the city, Richard Hayes was at a party. It was being held in the penthouse of the tallest building downtown. Rich people filled every room, wearing expensive clothes and drinking champagne that cost more than Rosa made in a month. Music played from hidden speakers. People laughed and talked about their businesses, their vacations, their new cars and boats and houses. Richard stood by a huge window, looking out at the city lights below. He held a glass of champagne, but hadn't taken a single sip. A man in a tuxedo walked up and clapped Richard on the shoulder. "Congratulations on the merger, Hayes," the man said loudly. "You just made yourself another $50 million. How does it feel?" Richard turned and gave the man a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. "It feels fine," he said quietly. The man laughed. "Fine? Come on. You should be celebrating. You're the richest man in the state. You've got everything anyone could want." Richard looked at the man and thought about saying what was really in his heart. He wanted to say that having everything felt like having nothing. He wanted to say that his huge house felt empty and cold. He wanted to say that he spent every day making money, but couldn't remember the last time he felt happy. He wanted to say that he had a beautiful daughter at home, but barely knew what her laugh sounded like. But Richard didn't say any of those things. He just nodded and took a tiny sip of his champagne. The party went on for hours. Richard talked to people, because that's what he was supposed to do. He shook hands and smiled and pretended to care about conversations that felt meaningless. But the whole time, something felt wrong. He kept checking his watch. He kept thinking about Emma. Had she eaten her dinner? Was she sleeping peacefully? Did she miss him? Did she even know who he was anymore? Finally, around 4 a.m, Richard couldn't take it anymore. He quietly left the party, without saying goodbye to anyone. His driver was waiting outside with the car, a long black car that looked like something a president would ride in. Richard climbed into the back seat and told the driver to take him home. The city streets were empty and dark. Street lights made puddles of yellow light on the pavement. Richard leaned his head against the cold window and watched the buildings pass by. He felt so alone, even more alone than usual. The successful business deal that everyone was congratulating him about felt pointless. Money, he realized, couldn't fill the emptiness inside him. It just bought bigger rooms for the emptiness to echo in. The car pulled up to Richard's mansion just as the sky was starting to change color. Dawn was coming. The black sky was turned to dark blue, then to purple, then to pink along the edges where the sun would soon rise. Richard got out of the car and stood in his driveway, looking at his enormous house. All the windows were dark. Nobody was awake yet. The house looked lonely somehow, like it was waiting for something that never came. Richard loosened his tie and started walking toward the front door. He moved slowly, tired from the long night, but also not wanting to go inside to more silence. His expensive leather shoes crunched on the gravel driveway. The cold morning air bit at his face. He breathed in deeply and smelled autumn, that smell of dying leaves and cold earth and change coming. And that's when he saw something that made his heart stop beating. There, on the wooden bench in his garden, was a shape. 2 shapes actually wrapped together. Richard squinted in the dim morning light. He took a step closer. Then another. His eyes adjusted, and suddenly he could see clearly. It was Rosa, and she was holding Emma. Both of them were sleeping. Rosa's old shawl covered them like a thin cocoon. Emma's head rested against Rosa's chest. Rosa's arms were wrapped around Emma protectively, even in sleep. They looked peaceful, like a painting of a mother and child. Richard's mouth fell open. His whole body went rigid with shock. What were they doing out here? Why was Rosa sleeping outside with his baby? Had something terrible happened? Was Emma hurt? 1,000 questions exploded in his mind all at once. Fear grabbed his throat and squeezed. He started walking quickly toward the bench, almost running. His first feeling was anger. Hot, burning anger. How dare Rosa take Emma outside in the freezing cold? What kind of irresponsible, careless thing was this to do? He would fire her immediately. He would make sure she never worked anywhere again. How could she put his daughter in danger like this? But as Richard got closer, something made him slow down. He looked more carefully at Rosa's face. Even asleep, she looked worried. Her eyebrows were pulled together like she was having a troubled dream. Her face was pale from the cold. Her lips had a bluish tint. She was shivering slightly even in her sleep. But her arms, those arms holding Emma, were steady and strong, and her hands, rough and worn from years of hard work, were positioned so gently around the baby, not carelessly, not lazily, but with the kind of tender protection that comes from deep, true love. Richard looked at Emma next. His daughter was sleeping more peacefully than he had ever seen her sleep before. There was no crying, no fussing, no discomfort. Just deep, calm, beautiful sleep. Emma's tiny hand was gripping Rosa's gray uniform. Her little body was curled against Rosa like she belonged there. Richard had never seen his daughter look so safe, so completely protected, so utterly loved. Richard stood there frozen, in the cold morning air. He couldn't move. He could barely breathe. His anger melted away like snow under the sun. In its place came something else. Something that felt like shame mixed with wonder mixed with pain. So deep it made his chest ache. Because standing there in his $1,000 suit, looking at his maid and his daughter sleeping on a cold bench, Richard suddenly understood something that shook him to his very core. This woman, who had almost nothing, was giving his daughter everything. This maid, who he barely noticed most days, loved his child more deeply than he had ever shown. This humble worker, who scrubbed his floors and washed his dishes, was doing what he, with all his millions of dollars in power and success, had completely failed to do. She was simply being there. She was showing up. She was loving Emma not with money or gifts or expensive things, but with her whole heart and her whole self. Tears filled Richard's eyes. They spilled down his cheeks, hot against his cold skin. He didn't try to wipe them away. He just stood there and let them fall. He didn't understand yet why Rosa was outside. He didn't know what had happened during the night, but he knew, deep in his soul, that whatever had happened, Rosa had done it out of pure love, and that changed everything. Richard took a deep breath and stepped closer to the bench. He knelt down slowly on the cold, wet grass beside them. His expensive pants got muddy and damp, but he didn't care. He was so close now, he could hear both of them breathing. Emma's breath was soft and sweet, like a whisper. Rosa's breath was deeper, tired, the breath of someone who had given everything they had. Richard reached out with a trembling hand and gently touched Rosa's shoulder. "Rosa," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Rosa, please wake up." Rosa's eyes flew open immediately. For one confused second, she didn't know where she was. She saw the pink sky, felt the cold air, heard the birds starting to sing. Then she saw Richard kneeling beside her in his fancy suit, and pure terror flooded through her body. She sat up so fast she almost dropped Emma, but her arms instinctively tightened around the baby to keep her safe. Emma stirred and made a small sound but didn't wake up. She just snuggled deeper into Rosa's chest. "Mr. Hayes?" Rosa whispered, her voice shaking like leaves in the wind. "I am so sorry. Please, I am so sorry." Richard saw the fear in her eyes. He saw her whole body trembling, and he knew it wasn't just from the cold. She thought he was going to fire her. She thought he was angry. She thought she had done something terribly, horribly wrong. And that realization broke something inside Richard's heart. It cracked it wide open. "Why are you outside?" Richard asked gently, keeping his voice calm and soft. "Why is Emma out here in the cold?" Rosa's eyes filled with tears that spilled over and ran down her cheeks. "The heater broke," she said, the words tumbling out fast and desperate. "The nursery got so cold, Mr. Hayes." Emma was crying and shaking. "I called Tom to fix it, but he did not answer. I called many times. 6 times, maybe 7. I did not know what to do. I could not let her freeze. I could not let her suffer. So I brought her out here where it was not as cold as that broken room. I held her to keep her warm with my body. I did not mean to fall asleep. I only closed my eyes for 1 second. Please, I am so sorry. Please do not fire me. I need this job. My children, they need the money I send home." Richard listened to every single word. Each sentence hit him like a hammer to the chest. The heater had broken. His baby had been freezing. And where had he been? At a party, drinking champagne, talking about money, celebrating a business deal. While his daughter was in danger, he had been smiling and shaking hands with people whose names he couldn't even remember now. While Rosa was risking her life to save Emma, he had been worried about looking successful and important. "You could have died out here," Richard said, his voice cracking with emotion. "Both of you could have frozen to death." Rosa looked down at Emma, still sleeping peacefully against her chest. A sad but beautiful smile crossed Rosa's face. Her voice was soft when she spoke. "As long as she was warm and safe," Rosa whispered, "nothing else mattered to me." Those words hung in the cold morning air like church bells ringing. Richard stared at Rosa, really truly seeing her for the first time ever. He saw the deep lines around her eyes from years of working hard and worrying. He saw her hands, rough and cracked and red from scrubbing and cleaning until they hurt. He saw her thin body that probably hadn't had a proper meal in days because she was saving every penny to send back to her children. He saw the gray streaks in her black hair. He saw the tiredness in her face. And he saw something else too. He saw a heart so enormous, so pure, so full of selfless love that it made his own heart feel tiny and dark and empty. "Come inside," Richard said quietly but firmly. "Both of you, right now. Let me make you some hot tea. Let me get you warm. Let me help you." Rosa shook her head quickly. "No, Mr. Hayes. I need to take Emma back to her nursery. I need to start my work. I have so many rooms to clean today. I have floors to wash and dishes to do. I am already so late." "The cleaning can wait," Richard said, and his voice was stronger now. "You need rest. You need warmth. You need to be taken care of. And I need to understand what happened. I need to know everything." He reached out and carefully took Emma from Rosa's arms. The baby was so warm, so soft, so perfect. Richard held his daughter close against his chest and felt her tiny heartbeat. When was the last time he had held her like this? When was the last time he had just sat with her, not thinking about work or checking his phone or rushing off to another meeting? He honestly cannot remember. And that shame hit him again, even harder this time, like a wave crashing over his head. Rosa tried to stand up, but her legs were stiff and numb from sitting all night in the cold. She stumbled and almost fell. Richard caught her elbow with his free hand and steadied her. Together, they walked slowly back toward the mansion. The sun was rising now, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange and gold. Birds sang their morning songs. The world was waking up to a new day. Inside the house, Richard led Rosa to the kitchen. He had never actually spent time in his own kitchen before. He always ate food that other people prepared and brought to him. He didn't even know where things were kept. But he searched through cabinets until he found a box of tea bags. He filled the kettle with water and turned on the stove. His hands shook as he worked. He had signed business contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars without his hands shaking. But making tea for his maid made him nervous. Because this mattered. This was real. This was important in a way that money could never be. While the water boiled, Richard sat down at the kitchen table with Emma still in his arms. Rosa sat across from him, looking small and scared and exhausted. The kitchen was warm and bright. Richard poured hot tea into 2 cups and pushed one across the table to Rosa. She wrapped her cold hands around the cup and whispered "thank you" so quietly he almost didn't hear it. They sat in silence for a moment. Richard watched Rosa's face as she sipped the tea. He saw the warmth slowly come back into her cheeks. He saw her stop shivering. He saw her shoulders relax just a tiny bit. And he made a decision that would change everything. "Rosa," Richard said, and his voice was different now. Softer, more human. "I have been a terrible father to Emma. I have been so busy making money that I forgot what really matters. You have shown me something tonight that I should have known all along. Love is not about how much money you spend. Love is about showing up, being there, caring more about someone else than you care about yourself. You did that for Emma. You risked everything for her. And I cannot thank you enough." Rosa's eyes went wide with surprise. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Richard continued, "From now on, things are going to be different. I am going to be here more. I am going to be the father Emma deserves. And you, Rosa, you are not just a maid anymore. You are family. I am tripling your salary. I am going to help you bring your children here from Mexico so you can be with them. They can live here in this big empty house that needs more love and laughter in it. Emma needs other children to play with. And I need to remember what really matters in life." Rosa's tears came flooding out now. Not tears of fear, but tears of joy and relief and gratitude. "Mr. Hayes," she sobbed, "I do not know what to say." "Say yes," Richard said with a real smile, the first genuine smile he had smiled in years. "Say yes to being part of this family. Say yes to helping me learn how to be a better father. Say yes to filling this cold house with warmth." Rosa looked down at her cup of tea, then back up at Richard holding baby Emma. She saw something in his eyes that had not been there before. She saw hope. She saw change. She saw love beginning to grow where there had only been emptiness. And Rosa smiled through her tears and nodded her head. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Mr. Hayes. Yes to all of it." And in that simple kitchen, as the sun rose outside and filled the room with golden light, 3 people who had been lost began to find their way home. Because sometimes it takes a cold night and a hard wooden bench to teach us what really matters. Sometimes we have to lose everything to understand what true wealth really means. And sometimes the greatest lessons come from the most humble teachers who love us enough to sit in the freezing cold and keep us safe while we sleep.